Today, we're going to venture deep into the densest forests with 7 horror stories involving isolated cabins in the middle of the woods. Get ready to hear chilling tales of remote hideaways that turned into traps, sinister encounters far from civilization, and what can happen when you're completely alone, surrounded only by trees and darkness. So settle in, make sure all the windows are closed, and let's begin this spine-chilling journey. Oh, and before something appears in your cabin window, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave a like. This helps the channel a lot and ensures that you don't miss any scary content like this. Let's go! The lost, trail-thick fog enveloped the trees when the 4 friends realized they were lost. What was supposed to be a 6-hour hike through Tatra National Park had turned into a 10-hour journey with no end in sight, and the sun was already beginning to set. "Impossible," Marcus muttered, consulting the map for the 10th time. The 28-year-old German was an experienced mountaineer who had meticulously planned the trip. This trail is marked moderate in all the guidebooks. His friends, Lucas, Anya, and Sophia, exchanged worried glances. The temperature was dropping rapidly as night fell, and none of them were equipped for a night on the mountain. "Someone messed with the markings," Lucas said, pointing to a tree where the traditional red stripe looked freshly painted but pointed in a different direction than the one indicated on the map. It was Sophia who first spotted the smoke between the trees. "Look, there must be a cabin nearby." Following the thin column of smoke, they found a clearing where a wooden hut stood, solid and welcoming. Yellow lights shone through the windows, and a chimney belched out smoke steadily. The door opened before they could even knock. A man of about 60, tall and thin, with a grey beard and deep blue eyes, smiled at them. "Lost on the trail, are we?" he asked in English with a strong Slavic accent. "It happens a lot around here. I'm Milos. Come in, come in. It's going to be a cold night." The cabin's interior was surprisingly spacious and cozy. A log fire crackled, spreading warmth throughout the room. Antique tools and hunting trophies lined the walls. The furniture was rustic and seemingly handcrafted. Dark wooden chairs with leather upholstery, a sturdy table, and shelves filled with curious objects. "You're lucky," Milos commented as he ladled hot soup into polished wooden bowls. "Few find my hut when they get lost. Most spend the night out there, some are never found." As they ate, Milos explained that he had lived here for 30 years, ever since he had left his job as a taxidermist in Bratislava. "I prefer solitude," he said, his eyes roving the faces of his visitors with unusual interest, "although I do enjoy occasional company." Anya, an interior designer, admired the quirky decor. "Your furniture is fascinating. I've never seen leather worked in this way." Milos smiled. "Special technique. I use only selected materials." After dinner, Milos showed them where they would sleep, a converted attic with 4 narrow beds. "Get a good rest. I'll show you the way back to the main trail tomorrow morning." Exhausted, the friends quickly fell asleep, except for Marcus, who was bothered by a detail he couldn't quite place. Something about the cabin seemed wrong. During the early morning, he woke up scared. He realized what was bothering him. The altered trail markings appeared to have the same paint Milos used on his woodwork. He silently got up to investigate. On the ground floor, he found Milos working by the light of a single bulb. The man was bent over a table, carefully filing what appeared to be a new knife handle. The material was not wood, as Marcus initially thought, but something lighter with distinct patterns. Milos must have sensed his presence, for he spoke without turning. "Around human bone. Excellent for tool handles, firm but with some flexibility when worked correctly." Marcus froze. Milos turned slowly, knife in hand. "The femur of that Dutchman from last month. Strong like you. His bones will come in handy too, with growing." Horror, Marcus realized the truth about the selected materials. The chairs upholstered in human leather, the polished bowls made from skulls, the decorative objects carved from bone, the trails. "You change the markings," Marcus whispered. "I just redirect the most promising ones to my collection," Milos confirmed calmly. "I've been doing this for decades. The authorities believe the missing ones simply got lost in the mountains. It happens every year." Marcus ran to the attic to wake his friends, but found only Lucas. Anya and Sophia were gone, along with their sleeping bags. "I've already started processing the girls," Milos explained, who had silently followed him. "The basement has adequate space to work. You two are next." What followed was a desperate fight for survival. Marcus managed to push a bookshelf onto Milos, buying enough time to wake Lucas up. They both fled into the dark forest, pursued by the man who knew every inch of the terrain. Only Marcus managed to reach a secondary road at dawn, where a group of cyclists found him, exhausted and in shock. Slovak police were initially skeptical, but the German authorities' insistence prompted a full investigation. The hut was found empty. Milos had disappeared, taking his tools with him. In the basement, gruesome evidence confirmed Marcus's story. A meticulously organized workspace with taxidermy and tanning tools and human remains in various stages of processing. Forensic analysis has identified DNA from at least 17 people who have gone missing in the Tatra Mountains over the past 20 years. The bodies of Lucas, Anja, and Sophia have never been found. Milos Kralik remains at large. Hikers occasionally report seeing an elderly man in the park's more remote areas, often near trails where the markings appear to have been recently altered. Tatra National Park authorities are now warning all visitors: always hike in groups, never stray from the main trails, and never accept shelter from strangers in the mountains, especially if the hut's decor looks strangely unique and handmade. To photographer, the morning mist still hung over the pine trees when Claire Bennett set up her tripod on the cabin's porch. At 34, the Canadian wildlife photographer had built a reputation for capturing rarely photographed animals in their natural habitats. Her new project, documenting the elusive Scottish wildcat for National Geographic, had brought her to this secluded cabin in the Scottish Highlands. "Perfect," he murmured, adjusting his Canon with a 600mm telephoto lens. The cabin, rented for 6 weeks, had a prime view of a valley where sightings of the cat had been reported. Isolated, with no internet and limited electricity to a generator, it was the ideal location for his work. For the first week, Claire established a routine. She would photograph at dawn and dusk, the peak times for wildcats, and process the images during the day. It was on the 10th day that he noticed something strange through his lens. Photographing an area about half a mile from the cabin, he caught a movement that was clearly not animal. Enlarging the image on his laptop, he made out the silhouette of a man watching a group of hikers from a rocky outcrop. Something about his posture, crouched, still, methodical, seemed predatory. 2 days later, photographing the same area, Claire captured a disturbing sequence. The same man stealthily following a lone hiker who had become separated from his group. The images showed the stranger moving with calculated precision, always out of the hiker's field of vision, gradually approaching. At the small library in Aviemore, the nearest village, he searched through the digital archives of the local newspaper. What he found chilled his blood. In the past 5 years, 4 people had disappeared in the area, 2 hikers and, more disturbingly, 2 nature photographers working on solitary projects. Back at the cabin, Claire obsessively reviewed her photographs. In several of them, she recognized the same man, always at a distance, always watching people. In one particularly clear image, she made out details. He was about 50 years old, with a grey beard, wearing camouflage hunting gear and carrying a large backpack. That night, a faint noise woke her, footsteps on the perimeter of the cabin. Through the window, she saw only darkness. In the morning, she discovered footprints in the mud near the porch, determined to document more evidence. Before contacting authorities, Claire changed her routine. Instead of photographing animals, she began systematically monitoring the most isolated trails. Over the course of 3 days, she captured images of the man following different groups, always following the same methodical pattern. On the 4th morning, as Claire reviewed the photos from the previous day, she noticed something she had missed. In one of the images, the man was looking directly at her, as if he had noticed the camera lens reflecting the sunlight. Her stomach tightened. She had been discovered. He decided to leave immediately. As he was packing his gear, he heard a noise at the back door. Someone was trying to get in. With his heart racing, he grabbed only his camera, memory cards, and satellite phone and escaped through the front window. Running down the trail toward the main road, Claire tried to make an emergency call. No signal. The device had been damaged in the hasty escape. He chose to avoid the marked trails, where he would be easily visible. Moving through the dense vegetation, he guided himself by the moss on the trees and the position of the sun. After 2 hours, he stopped to catch his breath and check his location. The sudden silence of the forest alerted her. Instinctively, she raised her camera and used the telephoto lens as a makeshift spotting scope, scanning the terrain behind her. There it was, a quarter of a mile away, moving methodically toward her, following her trail with uncanny precision. Claire photographed it compulsively. If anything happened to her, she wanted to leave evidence. As the sun began to set, Claire spotted something through the trees, the roof of a building. Approaching cautiously, she discovered an abandoned hunting cabin. The door was locked, but a side window gave way with a determined push. That was when she noticed the photographs pinned to a corkboard. Grainy images, clearly taken from a distance, showing people engaged in various activities in the woods. Some of the faces she recognized from the articles about missing persons. With growing horror, she realized that she had found her stalker's hiding place. A noise outside alerted her. He had arrived. Claire hid under the table, camera in hand, determined to document what would happen next. The door opened slowly. Heavy, boots stepped into Claire's limited field of vision. The man moved through the cabin, checking every corner methodically. As he approached the table, Claire flashed her camera repeatedly, momentarily blinding him, and ran for the door. The chase that followed lasted all night. A deadly game of cat and mouse through the dark forest. Claire used all the techniques she had learned from observing wild animals, moving silently, using the terrain to her advantage. At dawn, exhausted but determined, she finally reached the road, where a group of morning cyclists found her, disoriented and suffering from mild hypothermia. The subsequent investigation, based on Claire's photographs, led to the identification of Robert McGregor, a former hunting guide who had become a manhunter after a psychological breakdown. In his cabin and residence, police found evidence linking him to 6 disappearances. The case of the Highland Hunt, as it became known, was documented in an award-winning article by Claire herself for National Geographic, combining her wildlife photographs with inadvertently captured footage of her human predator. The inheritance snow was falling softly as Emma Tanaka parked her rental car on the trail leading to the cabin. At 32, this Japanese-American architect never imagined she would inherit property in the country her grandfather had left decades ago. Uncle Hiroshi, his mother's brother, was practically a stranger, a recluse who lived in the mountains of Hokkaido. Traditional hut on 5 hectares of land, the lawyer in Tokyo had said. Your uncle was quite specific. The property must remain in the family. The cabin was larger than Emma had expected. a traditional Japanese building of dark wood, perfectly maintained despite its isolation. The property was 40 minutes from the small village of Kamikawa, surrounded by dense forest. "I'll catalog everything and sell it," Emma thought, planning to return to Seattle in a week. On the second day, while sorting through her uncle's belongings, Emma found a locked box under the floorboards of the master bedroom. The key, hidden inside a book on the bookshelf, revealed its contents: meticulously kept diaries spanning 3 decades, photographs, and a detailed map of the area marked in red. The diaries revealed something disturbing. Hiroshi was part of a group calling themselves the Providers, owners of isolated cabins, who had set up a macabre business. "Another success today," read one entry from 2018. "American hiker, approximately 25 years old, excellent physical condition. Matsumoto-san was especially pleased with the quality. My share brought in Y3000,000. With growing horror, Emma realized her uncle and 7 other cabin owners in the area were kidnapping foreign backpackers on remote trails, processing the bodies and selling the products on an underground market. The photographs showed the other members of the group, middle-aged men and women, respectable in appearance. The map indicated their cabins, strategically positioned along popular trails. Nauseated, Emma was about to contact the authorities when she heard a car approaching. An elderly man and a woman in their 50s got out, carrying a traditional gift. "Basket! Tanaka-san," the man called in Japanese. "We've come to welcome Hiroshi's niece." Emma quickly hid the diaries and answered the door. The couple introduced themselves as Yamamoto Kenji and his daughter Yuki, neighbors from a nearby cabin. "Your uncle was well respected in our circle," Yuki said. "When we heard of his arrival, we were all relieved that the family tradition would continue." "Tradition?" Emma asked cautiously. "Business," Kenji replied with a serene smile. "Hiroshi was a valuable partner. His position on the Eastern Trail is strategic." The conversation continued with veiled references that confirmed Emma's suspicions. They clearly assumed that she knew about her uncle's activities and expected her participation. "We have an important client next week," Yuki mentioned casually. Usually Hiroshi would take care of the initial part. That night, another car arrived. A younger man, Takeshi, who introduced himself as the group's technician. He brought equipment he wanted to set up in the cabin's workspace. Emma feigned cooperation, showing him an outbuilding she had not yet explored. The interior confirmed her worst fears: a clinically clean room with stainless steel tables, drainage systems, and industrial butchery equipment. When he left, Emma gathered all the evidence she could. She tried to call the police, but discovered that the cell phone signal was being blocked by some device installed on the property. He decided to flee immediately, but discovered that someone had removed essential parts from his car's engine, a precaution to ensure that new members could not simply disappear. With no other alternative, Emma prepared for dinner the next night, where she would meet the entire group. She hid a small tape recorder in her clothing, determined to obtain more evidence. Yamamoto's house was a traditional Japanese mansion. 8 people welcomed her, the owners of the huts marked on the map. During dinner, they openly discussed their business, admitting their complicity. "Your uncle was an expert at selection," an elderly woman explained. "He could spot the backpackers no one else would immediately look for." The plan was clear. On Thursday, a backpacker would be directed to the trailhead near Emma's cabin. She was to offer shelter, administer a sedative, and begin processing with Takeshi's help. That night, Emma escaped through the forest, walking to the main road, where she hitchhiked to Asahikawa. At the police station, she presented all the evidence. The investigation revealed the full horror. For more than 30 years, the group had processed dozens of foreign backpackers, selling organs and other human products on a black market. The Hokkaido provider's case shocked Japan. 6 members of the group were arrested, although Kenji and Takeshi committed suicide before their capture. For Emma, who never returned to Japan, there remains the nightmare of almost becoming part of a family legacy that turned adventurers into merchandise in the peaceful mountains where the snow silently covers all secrets. Hey guys, the stories about cabins in the middle of the woods are still creepy, aren't they? If you're enjoying these scary stories, take a quick break, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing you more creepy content. Now, let's get back to the next stories. There's still a lot of scary stuff ahead. The refuge Autumn was painting the Carpathian forests when Daniel Foster arrived at the cabin. The 37-year-old American writer was facing writer's block on his 3rd novel, and his agent had suggested a secluded retreat to regain inspiration. No internet, no distractions, Daniel muttered, surveying the wooden cabin. Situated 20 kilometers from the small village of Bran, the property was surrounded by dense forests. The owner, Adrian Popescu, had explained that the cabin had been built by his grandfather. Perfect for writers, he had assured him. No one will disturb you. I only come once a week to bring supplies. For the first few days, the plan worked perfectly. Free from the distractions of the digital world, Daniel established a productive routine. Mornings were spent writing, afternoons walking in the woods. It was during a storm on the 10th day that Daniel made his discovery. A persistent leak in the living room floor prompted him to move the heavy rug. Beneath it, he found a barely visible trapdoor, cleverly camouflaged in the pattern of the floor. Curiosity overcame prudence. Using a knife as a lever, Daniel managed to open the trapdoor, revealing a narrow staircase. Using the flashlight on his cell phone, he ventured up the steps. The basement was surprisingly spacious and well-organized. Metal shelves held medical supplies, vacuum-packed clothing, and boxes of food. In one corner, he found blank identity documents from several countries, official stamps, and a high-quality printer. Most disturbing, an area with thin mattresses on the floor, separated by makeshift partitions. Beside each mattress, handcuffs were attached to the wall. On a whiteboard, notes detailed dates, names and values. Shipment arrives on the 24th, transfer on the 26th, payment confirmed. The date mentioned was 2 days away. Daniel took pictures of the whole thing with his phone. The cabin wasn't a writer's retreat. It was a transit station for human trafficking, strategically located in a remote area close to the border. He decided to leave immediately. As he was packing his belongings, he heard a vehicle approaching, long before the scheduled refueling date. Through the window, he saw an unmarked white van pulling up. Adrian got out of the vehicle, accompanied by 2 burly men. One of them pointed to the lights on in the basement, visible through a small window at ground level. They knew. Daniel grabbed only his cell phone, passport, and hiking backpack. He quietly left through the back door while the men argued in front. Of the cabin, the forest offered cover, but also challenges. With no marked trails, he guided himself by the position of the sun, trying to maintain a constant heading southwest, where he would eventually find the main road. After an hour of walking, he stopped to check his location. No signal. As he put away his cell phone, he heard distant voices and barking. The hunt had begun. Daniel picked up the pace. Darkness was beginning to fall, making navigation more difficult. As the sounds of his pursuers grew closer, he hid in a rock formation, covering himself with leaves. The barking passed him and faded into the distance. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Daniel changed direction, following a stream to confuse the dogs. The night in the forest was endless. At dawn, he spotted a cell tower on top of a distant hill. He decided to take a chance, abandoning the route to the village in favor of the possibility of communication. The climb was grueling, but when he reached the top, Daniel finally got a weak signal. He quickly sent the photos to his email and tried to call the police. The call dropped after a few seconds, but he managed to send his approximate location. As he descended the hill, he heard a helicopter. For a moment he felt relief. Perhaps it was the authorities. That hope was dashed when he saw the unmarked aircraft flying low, clearly searching for him. He hid beneath a rock formation, watching the helicopter circle ever tighter. Below, he saw men with rifles moving methodically. When the helicopter finally pulled away, Daniel made his final move, a desperate dash toward a side road visible in the valley. He was only 100 meters from the road when he heard the shot. The bullet hit a nearby tree. Out of options, he kept running, weaving between the trees. The sight of a logging truck gave him renewed strength. Waving frantically, he managed to get the driver to stop. The man, a local lumberjack, understood enough of the situation to help him, speeding up when he saw the armed men emerging from the forest. At the Brasov police station, authorities were initially skeptical, but the photographs eventually convinced them to investigate. When a police team arrived at the cabin, they found it completely clean, no sign of the basement. It was only when authorities found a second underground hideout 2 kilometers from the cabin that the truth emerged. There they discovered 12 people, young men and women from Ukraine and Moldova, awaiting transport to Western Europe. Adrian Popescu was never found, but the operation led to the dismantling of one of the largest human trafficking rings in the region. For Daniel Foster, the experience became his best-selling book, a non-fiction account titled The Refuge. And for travelers seeking solitude in remote cabins, be warned, sometimes the real horror lies not in local legends, but in the very human secrets hidden beneath seemingly innocent floors. The transmission. The rain was pouring down relentlessly when Megan and Jason Chen lost their GPS signal. What was supposed to be a romantic weekend in the Canadian mountains turned into a nightmare when their rental SUV got stuck on a muddy back road. "We need to find shelter," Jason shouted, trying to make himself heard above the thunder. Megan pointed to a dark shape in the trees, a cabin that didn't appear on any map. The San Francisco couple ran through the rain to the seemingly abandoned structure. The door wasn't locked, just jammed shut by the weather. The interior was surprisingly clean, though covered in a thin layer of dust. "That's strange," said Megan, a cybersecurity expert, noting the lack of cobwebs or signs of animals. "It looks like it was recently abandoned." While Jason built a fire using logs piled nearby, Megan explored the space. The cabin had 2 bedrooms, a basic kitchen, and a locked door. Curious, she used a hairpin to pry open the simple lock. What she found stopped her in her tracks. The room was a sophisticated operations center, 6 high-definition monitors, servers, satellite transmission equipment, and a complex control panel. Each monitor showed the interiors of different cabins, some occupied by people who looked like tourists or unsuspecting hikers. "Jason, you need to see this," she called, her voice shaking. Together they looked at the screens. On one, a lonely man was sleeping. On another, a couple was eating dinner by candlelight. A third showed a family with 2 children playing cards. "Is this some kind of surveillance network?" asked Jason, the history teacher. Megan, examining the equipment, found a laptop connected to the system. The password was surprisingly easy to crack: hunt season, followed by the current year. The contents revealed the full horror. "My God," she whispered, "this is a reality show. They call it The Hunt. People pay to watch other people being hunted." The files detailed an elaborate scheme. Tourists were subtly directed to specific cabins through fake rental websites or paid recommendations from locals. Each cabin was outfitted with hidden cameras and microphones. VIP viewers paid up to $50,000 to watch live as professional hunters stalked victims through the forests. "This can't be real," Jason muttered as Megan opened a video file. The Footage showed a woman running desperately through a forest identical to the one surrounding them, pursued by two men with tactical gear and what appeared to be tranquilizer guns. The date was only 3 weeks ago. A document titled Schedule chilled the couple's blood. Season 5, Episode 7. Asian-American couple, 30 to 35, urban professionals with no survival experience. Broadcast begins 8/20/2025, 6:00 a.m. The date was the next day. The participants were clearly them. "We need to get out of here now," Jason said, already moving towards the door. "Wait," Megan stopped him. "If we go in blindly, we'll walk right into their trap. We need to understand how this works." Looking through more files, they discovered that the cabin they were staying in was the abandoned control center from the previous season. Their new base of operations was 3 miles away. The Hunters, 3 ex-military men, identified only by code names, would position themselves around the target cabins at dawn. "They don't know we're here," Megan realized. "They think we're in the designated cabin." A plan began to form. Megan, using her skills, managed to access the broadcast system. While Jason stood guard, she worked feverishly for hours, changing codes and reconfiguring connections. "What exactly are you doing?" Jason asked. "First, by sending evidence to my FBI counterpart," she explained. "Second, by reversing the system. If I can do that, when they go live tomorrow, instead of showing us to the viewers, we'll expose the entire scheme to all the subscribers." At 5:30 a.m., they heard vehicles approaching. On the monitors, they saw 3 men in tactical gear positioning themselves around a cabin 2 kilometers away, where they should have been. "This is it," Megan whispered, finalizing the changes. As the clock struck 6 the lights on their equipment flickered. On the monitors, they saw the confused faces of the Hunters as their own communicators broadcast not instructions, but incriminating evidence. Simultaneously, hundreds of wealthy viewers around the world who had paid to watch a manhunt were shown. On their private screens, a message from the FBI and complete evidence of the criminal scheme in which they were participating. The ensuing chaos allowed Megan and Jason to escape through the woods, following a stream to avoid tracking. 3 hours later, they reached a main road where they were able to call for help. The resulting operation led to the arrest of 17 people in 5 countries, including organizers, hunters, and several prominent VIP viewers. Investigations revealed that the reality show had been operating for 4 years, with at least 23 previous victims, some of whom have never been found. For Megan and Jason, the experience left lasting scars, but also a sense of purpose. They founded an organization dedicated to identifying and dismantling illegal, human exploitation-based entertainment that thrives in dark corners of the internet. And for travelers in remote regions, here's a warning. That isolated cabin, conveniently discovered during a storm, may not be a refuge, but the first scene of a deadly spectacle where you are the main attraction. Year 6. The experiment as snow was beginning to fall when the Heidelberg University van pulled up next to the isolated cabin. 5 psychology students got out, carrying backpacks in anticipation for what they believed would be a prestigious study on group dynamics in controlled isolation. "Welcome," said Professor Klaus Weber, a renowned researcher in behavioral psychology. "Over the next 7 days, you will be pioneering a study that could redefine our understanding of psychological adaptation." The cabin was surprisingly modern inside, spacious, well-heated, with separate sleeping quarters and a common room equipped with visible cameras. The students, Sophie, Thomas, Lena, Marcus, and Aisha, had been selected from hundreds of applicants. The first day went as expected: quizzes, confidence-building exercises, and group discussions. On the second morning, the teacher's assistant had left during the night, supposedly called away for a family emergency. Today, "We begin phase 2, Weber announced, revealing 5 sealed boxes. Each will receive individual instructions that must remain confidential. The boxes contained manipulative directives designed to create distrust and tension within the group. By the 3rd morning, the electricity had been cut off, leaving the cabin freezing cold. When Sophie questioned the study's ethical protocol, Weber responded coldly, "You signed some pretty comprehensive terms." It was Aisha who first suspected that something was fundamentally wrong. She quietly shared her concerns with Thomas. Together, they reviewed their consent documents. The versions they had signed at the university differed significantly from the copies provided at the cabin. By the 4th night, the temperature had dropped below freezing, food became scarce, and Weber announced that the emergency generator had limited fuel that would be allocated based on each participant's performance. "Don't you realize the opportunity you have?" Weber asked, his behavior increasingly erratic. "We are documenting genuine human reactions without the artificial constraints imposed by ethics committees." In the professor's locked office, the students found alarming evidence. Weber had been dismissed from the university 6 months earlier for unethical conduct, but he had continued to recruit students using falsified credentials. His real goal was to document his psychological breakdown under extreme pressure. The next morning, they discovered that Weber had locked all the exits. When confronted, he abandoned all pretense of normalcy, threatening the students with an experimental, panic-inducing compound. In the ensuing struggle, Weber fell, hitting his head on the stone fireplace. With the teacher unconscious, the students managed to escape. The 6-hour walk through the snowy forest to the nearest road nearly cost Lena her life, already weakened by hypothermia. The subsequent investigation revealed that Weber had converted the family cabin into an unofficial laboratory after his dismissal. 2 previous groups had undergone similar experiments, with participants still undergoing psychiatric treatment. The Black Forest experiment case led to a complete overhaul of research protocols at German universities. Weber was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial and committed to a psychiatric institution. For the 5 students, the psychological scars remained long after the physical ones had healed. And for college students, attracted by well-paid studies in isolated locations, the warning was, always check the legitimacy of the research, because not everyone who presents themselves as a scientist is actually seeking knowledge. The community autumn was painting the forests golden when the Parker family arrived at their new home. David, a 42-year-old university professor tired of academic life, his wife Emma, a 39-year-old nurse, and their children Lily, 12, and Noah, 8, had sold almost everything in Vancouver to buy this secluded cabin in the Yukon Mountains. "Our new beginning," David declared as they unloaded the rental truck. The cabin was rustic but cozy, built of sturdy logs, heated by a wood stove, with limited solar power and its own water well. It was a 40-minute drive from the small town of Dawson, in an area where a dozen other cabins formed what the locals called Harmony Valley. The day after they arrived, neighbors showed up with gifts, homemade preserves, chopped firewood, and offers of help preparing the cabin for the harsh Canadian winter. Eleanor and Thomas Wilson, an elderly couple who had lived in the valley for 30 years, seemed to informally lead the community. "The winter here is relentless," Thomas explained as he helped David reinforce the roof. "But together we always survive. Community is our strength." The first few weeks were spent adapting and learning. The Parkers were included in community dinners, collective harvesting sessions, and practical lessons on wilderness survival. Lily and Noah, initially apprehensive about the radical change, soon became enchanted by the freedom and adventures of nature. It was during the Harvest Festival in October that Emma noticed something strange. While helping in the communal kitchen, she overheard Eleanor and another woman discussing in low voices evaluations and potential candidates. When they noticed her, they abruptly changed the subject. Days later, David found an old book in the small community library, a diary dated 1978, written by the founder of Vale Harmonia. The passages described the group's philosophy. Living in harmony with nature meant accepting all its laws, including natural selection. Only the fittest survive the winter, read one disturbing passage. The community cannot bear those who consume without contributing. The first snow ceremony is our way of honoring natural laws. When David mentioned the book to Thomas, the old man gently took it from his hands. Ancient history, he said with a tight smile. We have more modern methods now. In November, when the first snowfall completely sealed off the valley, the Parkers were invited to a community meeting at the central cabin. The atmosphere was solemn, almost ceremonial. Eleanor, wearing a robe embroidered with natural symbols, presided over the meeting. Winter has arrived, she announced. As we have done for generations, we must assess our resources and our collective ability to survive. With growing horror, the Parkers watched the assessment. Each family was assessed on its contribution to the community and its ability to weather the winter. Those who were older, sick, or considered less productive were marked on a crude board. This year we have limited resources, Eleanor continued. Our estimates indicate that we will only be able to support 37 of the current 42 members through the spring. Reality hit Emma like a physical blow. The community practiced a modern form of human sacrifice, disguised as natural selection. Those marked would be abandoned in a remote area during the next blizzard, with minimal supplies that would ensure their death. When the Grayson family, an elderly couple and their disabled adult daughter, received 3 markings, David protested. This is murder. We can't just decide who lives or dies. Eleanor smiled with disturbing serenity. We understand your shock, David. All new members go through it. But you chose to join us, and these are our traditions. Thomas placed a hand on David's shoulder. You're still on probation. Normally, new members don't participate in the first snow ceremony, but your reaction, it concerns the council. That night, the Parkers discussed their options. Escape was impossible. The roads were blocked by snow, and the community controlled the only functioning snowcat. Emma proposed an alternative rationing, giving them a week to spare. During that time, the family secretly planned their escape. When Noah fell ill with a fever, Eleanor denied antibiotics. Children get sick, the strong ones survive. Thomas secretly visited the Parkers. They have scarred your family. Eleanor sees you as a threat to tradition. The elderly man, who had lost his own daughter in a ceremony decades earlier, offered to help them escape. The escape through the night forest was terrifying. With Noah in David's arms, the family followed a narrow trail lit only by the moon. Behind them, they heard the alarm sound. Their absence had been discovered. After 3 hours of desperate travel, they reached the main road where a friend of Thomas was waiting with a truck. The family arrived in Whitehorse the next morning, reporting everything to the authorities. The investigation revealed that for more than 4 decades, Harmony Valley had practiced its natural selection, documenting 56 selections. When the police arrived, there was armed resistance. Eleanor and 2 council members were killed. For the Parkers, their dream of a simple life turned into a nightmare. Today, they share their story as a warning. Not all alternative communities seek true harmony, and some of the most dangerous philosophies hide behind the most welcoming facades. And so we come to the end of our 7 horror stories involving cabins in the middle of the woods. So which one scared you the most? Will any of them make you think twice before renting that isolated cabin for your next vacation? Tell us in the comments which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this dive into the spooky world of remote cabins, don't forget to leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and encourages me to bring you more spine-chilling stories. And if you're not a subscriber yet, take advantage now to subscribe and activate the bell.